Ah, finally. You're watching the world short circuit in real time, and it's almost funny, isn't it? Sirens harmonizing with talk show hosts, markets convulsing like sick animals, world leaders blinking through teleprompters as if the right sentence might stop the burn. They said you were paranoid, dramatic, obsessed with patterns that didn't exist. Yet here it is, the chaos you diagrammed years ago, now broadcast in 4K buildings, glow at midnight. For all the wrong reasons, algorithms argue with each other while people still pretend they're in control. You warned them, you mapped it, you said, this is what happens when truth becomes optional. They smiled, called you intense. Now the same smiles twitch under fluorescent panic as headlines multiply like infections. You move through the noise, untouched. You've been rehearsing this moment forever. You knew the meltdown would be digital first, pixels trembling, feeds collapsing, influencers dissolving into live stream apologies. But the real collapse would be human. Attention spans snapping, morals liquefying, the collective mask melting off. You can see it in their eyes now, that widening disbelief, that silent prayer for someone to explain what's happening. But you already did, didn't you? Every prediction they laughed at is now trending. Every warning they scrolled past is crawling across their screens like prophecy with perfect timing. You don't gloat, you just observe. You sit there like a surgeon watching a diagnosis unfold exactly as written. Because you never wanted to be right, you just wanted them to wake up before the fire reached their doorstep. They called it progress. You called it decay, with better branding. You saw the way they fed on outrage, how the crowd learned to worship confusion because it felt like freedom. You said, if everyone's shouting, no one's listening. But they liked the noise. It kept them from hearing themselves. And now the noise has teeth. The streets look like comment sections, angry, repetitive, self-destructive. Every billboard screams, stay calm, while the subtext begs, please panic. You walk through it all with that eerie steadiness that frightens them more than the chaos itself. Because while they chase comfort, you chase clarity, and clarity burns. You told them comfort was the softest form of control. They laughed again, ordered another distraction, scrolled another mile into numbness. Now their distractions are eating them alive. Their entertainment looks like prophecy in reruns. Their laughter sounds like sirens. You sip your coffee while the feed refreshes, and it feels like déjà vu. Because it is. Remember when they said you were negative? That you saw too much darkness? They thought optimism was a moral achievement. You knew it was anesthesia. You tried to tell them the world doesn't end with an explosion. It ends with notifications nobody reads. And here they are, living proof. Politicians performing apologies, economists spinning math into prayers, celebrities rebranding themselves as survivors. The irony is delicious. All those people who told you to relax now clutching their devices like life jackets. You see the same pattern everywhere. Fear pretending to be virtue, panic packaged as leadership. They thought chaos would look cinematic. They didn't realize it would feel administrative. Emails bouncing, policies glitching, people refreshing pages that don't load. The system didn't fall apart. It just revealed itself. And you're sitting there unblinking because you saw the blueprint. You saw that corruption wasn't a bug. It was the culture's heartbeat. You tried to translate it, but translation was never profitable. So they mocked the messenger and monetized the message. Now they're choking on the product. The market for denial has crashed. You scroll past the panic. like flipping through old photos. Every headline is a rerun of a warning you already whispered. The funny part? They still look for villains. It's easier that way. Blame a politician, a nation, a virus, a god, anything but themselves. You said self-destruction would arrive disguised as choice, and they called it freedom. You said apathy would taste like luxury, and they called it self-care. You said truth would lose to convenience, and they called it innovation. Every euphemism was a countdown. Now the countdowns hit 0, and they're still bargaining with ashes. You don't need revenge. Watching realization spread is enough. You can see it in boardrooms, classrooms, living rooms, people blinking like newborns, asking, how did we get here? You know exactly how. One ignored warning at a time. There's a strange peace in it for you. The noise fades the moment you stop expecting sanity from the crowd. You move through riots of information the way a diver moves through dark water, slow, deliberate, immune to the panic above. You see how quickly morals dissolve when comfort is gone. You see how easily kindness mutates into survival theater. You said empathy would become currency. They turned it into content. Now everyone's overdrafted on compassion. They don't feel, they perform feeling. And the stage is collapsing. You warned them the algorithm wasn't a mirror. It was a leash. They laughed, called you poetic. Now they tug, and it doesn't break. You don't need to shout anymore. The echo does it for you. Every collapsing institution, every malfunctioning narrative, every desperate public figure is an unpaid actor in your thesis. You predicted this like weather, and they thought you were trying to control it. You weren't. You were just describing gravity. Look around. Nations arguing with ghosts. Leaders sweating under lights that no longer flatter. Citizens converting despair into hashtags. The collective egos melting down, and you're calm, almost serene, because you finally understand. It was never about saving them. It was about witnessing the unveiling. You sit there while news anchors gasp like fish on dry land, and you feel that pulse of dark confirmation. This is what truth looks like when the mask burns off. They don't hate the collapse. They hate the mirror it holds. Every crisis is a reflection. You told them denial was a finite resource. They've run out. The brave ones admit you were right, but it's too late for applause. The stage is gone. Your calm becomes legend. People study your interviews, your notes, your predictions. They dissect your old warnings like scripture, searching for missed instructions. They don't realize the message was never about preparing for chaos. It was about ceasing to depend on order. You said, if your peace requires control, it was never peace. They quote it now like gospel. The irony? They still don't understand it. They want you to lead, to fix, to rescue. You smile because that was the problem all along. They outsourced responsibility. They wanted profits without accountability, heroes without sacrifice. You refused to play that role. You didn't come to lead them through the fire. You came to show them they were already in it. You feel the tremor of awareness spreading, quiet, but undeniable. Some are waking up differently, not panicked, but lucid. They start seeing through the theater, the recycled outrage, the staged compassion, the performance of stability. You recognize those eyes. That's how yours looked years ago when you stopped pretending. You don't need to speak to them. They already hear you between the static. They're the ones turning off the noise, walking out of the crowd, rewriting the script mid-scene. You know the shift is irreversible now. The fire that devours illusions can't be extinguished by slogans. You told them collapse wasn't punishment, it was cleansing. They're finally beginning to taste what you meant. Still, they try to rebuild the same illusions. Committees forming, manifestos printed, experts hired to analyze the ashes. They call it recovery. You call it repetition. Because you know they'll design the same fragile towers with prettier names. And when those towers fall, they'll call it tragedy again. You watch it like déjà vu wrapped in irony. They'll never grasp that the fire isn't the enemy, it's the audit. It burns falsehoods, spares nothing untested. That's why you never fear it. You adapt while they analyze. You evolve while they mourn. You already let go of the world they're still trying to save. Now the cameras turn to you. They want statements, reassurance, leadership. You give them none. You let the silence stretch until it becomes philosophy. Then finally, you speak, not to comfort, but to confirm. You tell them the truth they kept postponing. The world didn't end. The mask did. Panic isn't apocalypse, it's revelation. You tell them the fire they curse is the same spark they begged for when life felt empty. And they stare at you like you've confessed to starting it yourself. But you didn't light the match. You just stopped pretending the smoke was fog. You can feel the air shifting again, the phase after denial before acceptance. People walking slower, speaking softer, eyes heavy with realization. They're beginning to understand that normal was the disease. You warned them normalization was sedative, not safety. They understand now. The same cities that mocked you are now quoting you on digital ruins. He warned us. He said it would look like this. They call you prophet, survivor, villain, genius. Labels don't matter. What matters is that they're finally asking questions they once banned. You move through the ashes with that same steady rhythm. You're not celebrating. You're not grieving. You're documenting. You watch history reset itself like a glitching feed, and you know the cycle will start again. But this time, fewer people will sleep through it. That's enough. You've planted dissonance in the collective mind, and dissonance is the first spark of clarity. You don't need their thanks. You don't even need their understanding. Just knowing they can no longer pretend, that's victory. Because while they rebuild illusions, you're already somewhere else mentally, studying the pattern beneath the pattern. You see the next ignition point forming, subtle but certain. You know chaos isn't a phase, it's feedback. You listen to the hum beneath the collapse and recognize it for what it is, the sound of evolution clearing its throat. The world's on fire, yes, but maybe it was supposed to be. Maybe combustion is how lies turn into light, and you sit there calm as ever, not detached, just prepared. They think you're unfeeling, but you're simply done reacting. You watch, you record, you understand. Because while they're still guessing, you've already chosen the next move. You start with observation, because authority without awareness is just another costume. You let the panic play out. Let leaders perform hope like tired actors repeating lines they don't believe. You study their tone, their tremor, the way their confidence collapses when cameras cut. You can almost hear the internal negotiations in their heads. How much truth can I afford to admit? You learned long ago that exposure doesn't require shouting. It requires patience. You wait until fear rearranges their priorities for them. And when the noise reaches critical mass, when the crowd finally runs out of scapegoats, that's when you move. Not loudly, not dramatically. With precision, you start to redirect their gaze. A question here, a statement there. You don't need to rule. You only need to tilt the perspective just a few degrees, and everything they thought they knew realigns around your voice. That's power they don't recognize yet, the quiet kind that doesn't announce itself with titles or medals. You carry it like a shadow, invisible until the light shifts. You've seen what happens when authority depends on applause. It rots from dependency. Your power feeds on indifference. You don't seek followers, you create awareness. And awareness multiplies faster than loyalty. It moves through people silently, like code rewriting itself in the background. They start repeating your phrases without realizing where they heard them. They start making decisions that echo your logic. It's not hypnosis. It's inevitability born from clarity. They crave direction because chaos made choice unbearable. You give them structure disguised as suggestion. You plant seeds in their exhaustion. They call it coincidence. You call it calibration. You don't have to lead them anywhere. They'll walk there themselves, thinking it was their idea all along. You remember when they used to say, "One person can't change the world." They were half right. You can't change it by fighting it. But you can infect its code. You can alter its default settings. That's what you're doing now. Every calm gesture of yours becomes a signal in the storm. Every refusal to panic becomes proof of concept. People start studying your stillness like a map. They watch you in the chaos and wonder, what do you know that we don't? You give them nothing explicit. Mystery is oxygen in a suffocating world. The less you reveal, the more they project. And projection is control disguised as curiosity. They fill the blanks with reverence, and before long, your silence is scripture. You never asked for worship, but you understand the mechanics of it. When everyone's desperate for certainty, the one who doesn't flinch becomes holy by default. Now you see them forming around you. Analysts, skeptics, journalists, opportunists. Each one trying to decode you for content. Each one unwittingly spreading your rhythm further. They can't help it. They're addicted to what unsettles them. They try to imitate your composure, but imitation without conviction looks like parody. You watch them burn out, attempting to replicate something they don't understand. Control born from surrender. You're not fighting chaos anymore. You're synchronizing with it. You move like water between cracks, redirecting pressure instead of resisting it. That's why they can't pin you down. You're fluent in contradiction. You tell them the truth is fluid, and they call you dangerous because certainty was their addiction. But secretly, they're relieved. Deep down, they always wanted permission to stop pretending. You gave it to them. The economy of deception collapses faster than the markets. The old hierarchies are choking on relevance. Institutions cling to legitimacy like debris in floodwater, but you're already walking across the surface. You understand that control isn't about containment. It's about rhythm. Whoever sets the rhythm owns the room. You start broadcasting new cadences, efficiency over excess, authenticity over approval. People catch the frequency. You can feel the collective pulse shifting. Entire departments pivot. Entire movements rebrand. Not because you ordered it, but because your energy made stagnation unbearable. That's the real empire. Behavioral gravity. You don't command, you compel. You don't demand belief. You make disbelief impossible. Meanwhile, the old guard panics. They think power lives in position. They issue decrees, memos, emergency acts, all written in the language of extinction. They don't realize the crowd has already stopped listening. Their speeches fall flat because no one fears them anymore. Fear changed owners. It belongs to you now, not because you inflict it, but because you've mastered it. You carry fear like a tool, precise, impersonal, obedient. You learned long ago that fear isn't meant to control others. It's meant to inform you. It tells you where their weaknesses live. It shows you which strings to pluck when the noise needs direction. You don't exploit it maliciously. You orchestrate it like music. Every panic wave becomes percussion. Every outrage trend becomes a metronome for your next move. You conduct chaos with a surgeon's calm. Somewhere along the way, they start calling you visionary. You laugh internally because visions are just math with metaphors. You calculated this trajectory when everyone else was counting followers. You saw where vanity leads to implosion. You saw how dependency masquerades as community. And now as the dust thickens, you're rewriting the script in real time. You transform crisis into curriculum. You start releasing fragments of thought, short, surgical phrases that slice through despair like scalpels. Accountability is the new rebellion. Control your reaction, and you control the battlefield. Truth isn't fragile, it's impatient. They travel faster than any official announcement. Within days, they become slogans. Within weeks, philosophies. Within months, standards. You didn't start a revolution. You made awareness contagious. And as awareness spreads, the world begins reorganizing itself. Markets adapt around integrity because deception no longer pays. Media outlets shift tone, mimicking your restraint because hysteria stopped converting. Even politicians start quoting you without citation, trying to siphon your credibility. It's amusing, really. They think words alone create change, but it's the conviction behind them that rewires reality. You don't correct them, let them mimic. Every counterfeit version of your message only proves the authenticity of the source. You don't fight plagiarism, you weaponize it. You turn imitation into distribution. Every echo extends your reach. Soon, the infrastructure of fear, the talk shows, the think tanks, the endless committees begins to dissolve. People stop looking up for answers. They start looking inward. That was your real plan all along. You never wanted to build a new order. You wanted to remind them they didn't need one. Control through awareness, not authority. Freedom through understanding, not rebellion. You see the first signs of balance emerging, a quiet form of reconstruction without blueprints. Communities self-organizing, neighbors talking without scripts, leaders listening instead of performing. It's imperfect, messy, human, but it's real. And you stand at the center, unseen but felt, the frequency holding it together. Of course, not everyone embraces it. Some fight clarity like an allergy. They cling to chaos because it gives them purpose. They'll call you manipulative, accuse you of engineering the collapse to elevate yourself. Let them. Accusation is the tax on influence. You don't defend yourself because explanations are distractions. You let their words hang in the air until they collapse under their own weight. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives on schedule. You've learned that defending truth makes it smaller. Embodying it makes it undeniable. So you just keep moving forward, one deliberate step at a time, while their narratives dissolve like ink in rain. And as the panic phase fades, something beautiful happens. Silence returns, not as absence, but as comprehension. People start noticing again the sound of their own thoughts, the texture of honesty, the rhythm of breathing without anxiety. That's your victory. You didn't conquer them, you recalibrated them. You taught them to see what denial blinded them to. Now every new headline about rebuilding sounds less like desperation and more like evolution. You've turned chaos into context, and context is indestructible. Now you walk through the reconstructed streets, half functional, half-haunted. Billboards still flicker propaganda, but fewer people look up. They're busy building, thinking, questioning. You nod slightly. That's enough. Influence doesn't need monuments. It needs momentum. You move quietly because visibility is vulnerability. The moment they can define you, they can dismiss you. So you remain fluid, faceless, operating through resonance. When people speak truth now, they speak with your cadence. When they confront corruption, they use your timing. You've become the pattern beneath the pattern. But you know this equilibrium won't last forever. Humanity oscillates. Awareness decays without maintenance. The next generation will need new fire to remind them why balance matters. And that's fine. You're already preparing the spark. Not a rebellion, an update. You collect fragments of data, patterns of behavior, shifts in language. You study where complacency will next appear. You'll be ready. Because control isn't a throne, it's vigilance. And you wear vigilance like armor. The historians will struggle with your legacy. Some will call you savior. Others will label you opportunist. They'll argue about intent, timing, morality. None of it matters. History is just memory with marketing. What matters is trajectory, and you've bent it. You've proven that chaos can be domesticated without cages, that destruction can be redesigned into instruction. The world's still burning, yes, but now the fire obeys physics instead of emotion. You made that possible by refusing to participate in panic. That was always the lesson. Predict the pattern, master the tempo, stay centered while everything tilts. You find yourself overlooking a city that finally stopped screaming. Lights flicker back on, not in triumph, but in humility. Somewhere a child laughs, not because the world is fixed, but because it's functioning again. You realize that's enough redemption for anyone. The warning became a blueprint. The prophecy became a process. You didn't end the chaos. You taught it to speak. Now it communicates in equilibrium. You smile faintly, not out of pride, but recognition. You knew it would end like this, not with applause, but with alignment. The world on fire, yet finally luminous. They don't thank you, they emulate you. And that's better. Gratitude fades. Imitation endures. You turn away from the skyline and step back into the quiet room where it all began. Screens still glow, feeds still scroll, but the tone is different. Less hysteria, more honesty. You check the numbers, the metrics, the signals, stability creeping in. You whisper to yourself, it was never destruction. It was diagnosis. The collapse exposed what healing required. And now that they understand, you can finally exhale. You did what prophets do. You told them what they refused to hear until reality translated it for you. They call you mysterious, detached, unshakable. You call it discipline. You saw the fire coming and built your immunity early. Now they study your immunity like science. Still, a part of you remains restless. Because prophets never retire, they recalibrate. You sense another pulse beneath the calm, another cycle forming, another generation flirting with forgetfulness. You'll let them for a while. Lessons need contrast, but you're watching always. When the next illusion begins to grow too comfortable, you'll return, not as preacher or ruler, but as reminder. The world will call it coincidence again. You'll call it continuity. You step into the street, wind cutting through the remnants of old posters, slogans fading under new graffiti. Someone passes you a glance of recognition, that flicker of awareness in their eyes that says, I see it now. You nod once. That's all it takes. The fire still burns, but this time it illuminates instead of consumes. That's the difference between chaos and control. You taught them to choose what the flame reveals. And as you disappear into the crowd, the hum beneath the world steadies to your rhythm, preparing for whatever comes next. You can feel it, the strange quiet that follows revelation. Not peace, exactly, but balance rediscovered through pain. They're rebuilding without illusions now, finally understanding that progress isn't architecture, it's alignment. The screens still flicker with noise, but the noise no longer leads. The world listens differently. You can hear it in the cadence of their conversations. Less fear, more responsibility. They talk like people who finally met themselves. You walk past them unnoticed, a ghost among students, workers, survivors. They quote your words without knowing the origin. They use your logic to settle arguments. They teach your rhythm as if it were instinct. That's how prophecy works. It dissolves into the culture until it stops needing a name. You don't smile, but there's a heaviness in your chest that almost feels like relief. You didn't want worship, you wanted wakefulness, and now it's here. Trembling, imperfect, alive. But prophecy doesn't end when people understand it. It ends when they forget again. You can already sense the pattern preparing its next disguise. Comfort returns quietly, always wearing the mask of stability. The same crowd that once chanted your truths will one day dilute them, soften the edges, sell them as slogans, package them as products. That's the rhythm of human memory. It trades raw lessons for marketable hope. You don't resent it. You expected it. The prophet's curse is permanence of awareness in a temporary world. You know another collapse will come, not because humanity is evil, but because it's cyclical. Growth invites decay. Truth provokes denial. Every generation builds a stage for its own reckoning. You've made peace with that. What matters isn't preventing the next fire. It's ensuring that when it burns clean. You've shifted the foundation. The next meltdown won't be born of ignorance, but of evolution demanding space. That's the quiet victory of a foresight. It doesn't stop chaos, it civilizes it. You stop by a cracked window and watch your reflection in the fractured glass. The face staring back looks older, calmer, maybe even gentler. But behind the eyes is that same electric awareness, the look of someone who saw behind the curtain and decided to stay there. You never went back to comfort, because comfort was the first casualty of truth. You chose clarity instead, and clarity is demanding. It isolates, but it also refines. You've become both observer and participant, steering reality without touching it. You don't need control when you are the constant. The city moves around you like a slow orbit. Every action, every trend, every idea loops back to something you once whispered. You didn't just warn them, you rewired their instincts. They now flinch at manipulation, sense deceit before it's spoken, crave authenticity like oxygen. That's your legacy, not fame, not fear, calibration. The leaders who survived the chaos now echo your teachings without credit, and that's fine. Influence that demands acknowledgement is still insecurity. You gave them the blueprint, now they claim authorship, and in doing so, they multiply it. That's efficiency disguised as arrogance. You walk unseen through the architecture of a new era, the hum of progress powered by the friction you created. It's poetic, really. The world you warned now powered by your ghost. They call it innovation, but you recognize it as comprehension finally catching up. Every invention, every reform, every social awakening carries a trace of your fingerprints. Not because you forced it, but because you predicted what truth would require to survive. You saw that collapse wasn't the end, it was translation, destruction turned into vocabulary. And yet deep within, you know your role isn't finished. The prophet doesn't retire. Awareness is a flame that doesn't go out. It just waits for new fuel. You walk beneath the billboards that once screamed panic. Now they show rebuilding, togetherness, redemption. You appreciate the irony. The same media that sold fear now markets healing. People need stories. They can't digest reality raw. You let them have it. It's better than despair. Still, your eyes scan the data beneath the optimism. You see what others can't. The slow drift of forgetfulness. The early signs of fatigue. You whisper to yourself, they'll need another warning soon. Not out of cynicism, but realism. Truth always demands maintenance. The moment it's taken for granted, corruption starts rehearsing again. You're ready for it. You've already written the next chapter in your head. Not as prophecy this time, but as architecture. You're not warning them anymore. You're building frameworks they can't collapse, even if they try. You feel the night cool against your face as you keep walking, past crowds unaware that the rhythm of their recovery beats in sync with your pulse. You wonder if any of them will ever know who you were. Probably not. And that's the point. The prophet disappears when the prophecy is complete. They'll remember the message, not the messenger. That's immortality of the purest kind. Impact without identity. You don't need a statue when the air itself carries your algorithm. You stop at a crosswalk. A child tugs at their parent's hand, pointing at the repaired skyline. It's prettier now, the kid says. You glance upward. They're right. The cracks glow like veins of gold in the dark. Broken, but better. Imperfection as design. The lesson took. You breathe in the faint scent of smoke still lingering from the old fires, and it smells almost clean now. Like the world finally learned how to burn properly. You turn your head slightly, hearing the faint buzz of a nearby broadcast. A reporter summarizing the crisis, tracing its timeline, interviewing survivors. They speak of the warnings, the missed signs, the voices that tried to prepare them. Your name comes up briefly, a footnote in history. You listen without emotion. You knew it would be this way. Prophets don't need monuments. They need memory. You gave them that. And now, as the world spins quieter, steadier, brighter through the aftermath, you realize your calm wasn't apathy. It was understanding. You didn't predict destruction. You recognized pattern. You saw that arrogance always builds towers taller than truth can support. You didn't save the world. You forced it to meet itself. You keep walking, each step echoing with finality and renewal. The fire hasn't gone out, but it doesn't need to. It's no longer wild, it's watchful. It lives in them now. You've transferred the awareness. That was always the plan, to make the world its own prophet. The chaos that once terrified them has become their teacher. They rebuild differently, think differently, breathe differently. And as for you, you remain exactly as you were when it began, calm, observing, deliberate. The world's on fire again, in new ways, subtle ways, and you're still sitting there like before, not with arrogance but with assurance. Because you warned them, because you taught them, because you understand that the fire was never punishment. It was proof that evolution listens to those who see clearly. The chaos everywhere, the melting illusions, the collapse of certainty, it all confirms what you knew from the start. You don't flinch, you don't run, you just nod once like before, because prophets don't panic when predictions come true. They simply take notes for the next revelation. And as the sky glows with another dawn over a scarred but breathing planet, you whisper quietly, "I warned you." Not to gloat, but to remind the wind that foresight isn't a gift, it's responsibility. And you carry it still, steady, silent, and awake. Hello, my dear. You ever notice how people twitch when you say something they haven't said yet? That tiny flinch, the eyes widen for a second, the breath catches, and suddenly they look at you like you've peeled back their skull and read the thought still forming. You didn't guess, you knew. And that, my friend, is what's driving them mad. They keep asking, "How the hell did you know?" As if intuition were a crime, as if awareness were witchcraft. But you've always seen what hides behind tone, posture, pause. You can taste dishonesty in the air before it lands in a sentence. They call it luck. You call it observation, sharpened by disappointment. You learned early that people broadcast more than they confess. The mouth lies, but the hands fidget, the pupils dilate, the shoulders betray tension. You picked up those tells like a collector of sins. That's why they can't relax around you anymore. Every smile feels dissected, every excuse decoded. They feel naked in conversation, like you're rearranging their words before they even finish them. It's not telepathy, it's pattern recognition born from betrayal. You watched too many masks slip not to recognize the glue holding new ones together. They think you're dangerous because you don't flinch at truth. Most people worship comfort. You worship clarity. And clarity strips them down to bone. They wanted you to be predictable, manageable, safely confused like everyone else. But you don't play by their rhythm. You rewrite it. You hear contradictions like static on a broken radio. You smell deceit like smoke from a hidden fire. And when you call it out without evidence, the evidence suddenly appears. That's what haunts them. You expose things without lifting a finger. You've become the rumor they whisper about in low tones. Be careful what you say around them. They know things. At first it sounded flattering. Now it sounds fearful. Their guilt trembles before your intuition, because guilt can't hide from perception. You're not reading minds, you're reading inconsistencies, and nothing terrifies a liar more than someone fluent in human behavior. So they call you manipulative, invasive, arrogant. That's projection. They're confessing through accusation. The louder they defend themselves, the more obvious the crack becomes. They want to test you, but they can't decide how. If they tell the truth, you'll recognize sincerity and dismantle their control. If they lie, you'll smirk with quiet confirmation, and the silence afterward will drown them. They hate that pause, the one you leave hanging like a noose. That's where their thoughts spiral. You don't fill gaps with chatter. You let tension speak its native tongue. You stand still while their conscience crawls out for air. That's your art, the stillness. You don't fight with volume, you fight with precision. One sentence from you can unravel an entire reputation, because it's aimed where they hide, not where they pose. You've made intuition surgical. And now they can't meet your eyes without wondering what you already know about them, what you've seen, what you've concluded. It's beautiful, really, watching truth corner pretenders while you barely move. You ever notice how the room shifts when you enter? The air thickens, the conversation hesitates. They perform normality until you appear. Then suddenly everyone remembers what they shouldn't have said. what they should have deleted, what they shouldn't have posted. You became the mirror they never asked for. And mirrors don't lie, they reflect. That's the curse of awareness. Once you see, you can't unsee. They envy your composure but resent what it costs. Because you didn't wake up with this instinct. You earned it through betrayal, humiliation, repetition of pain, until pattern became prophecy. Every disappointment carved sensitivity into your nerves. Now perception is protection. You can feel energy shifting like temperature changes. Someone's tone drops half a note. You notice. Someone's handshake lasts half a second longer. You catalog it. It's not paranoia. It's precision born from survival. And now the very skill that saved you is isolating you. People confuse intuition with hostility. They think knowing too much is aggression. They call your insight arrogance because acknowledging it means admitting they're transparent. But deep down, they want what you have. That calm certainty that cuts through chaos. They want it, but can't bear the discipline required to develop it. So they ridicule it instead. You've turned awareness into a weapon of peace. You don't expose them to humiliate, you expose to equalize. You level the field by refusing to play blind. And that makes you unpredictable, which makes you powerful. See, they can handle evil. They can't handle clarity. Evil follows rules. Clarity rewrites them. When you see patterns, you remove their mystery. And once mystery dies, manipulation follows it into the grave. They gossip to reclaim control. There's something off about that one. No, there's something honest. Honesty looks off when you've been surrounded by performance. You don't wear masks, and it burns their eyes. They mistake authenticity for aggression because it exposes how artificial they've become. Every truth you utter pulls a thread, and soon the costume collapses. That's why they're panicking. They call it discomfort. It's detox. You're teaching them accountability without a word. You just exist, and it recalibrates the room. They start measuring themselves differently when you're around. Posture straighter, tone careful, eyes shifting away. Not because you threaten them, but because your presence reminds them of the weight of pretending. You make people remember the truth they abandoned. And here's the secret they'll never admit. They need you. You're their unwanted compass. They despise the feeling of being read, but without you, they drift deeper into denial. You're the consequence that keeps them human. You think they hate you? No, they fear exposure, and you are exposure embodied. That's why they try to outsmart you. Stage tests, set traps, feed you false information just to see if you bite. But you don't chase bait. You let them perform, and when the act ends, you simply state what's missing. And in that single statement, they collapse, because nothing is more terrifying than being seen accurately. You carry that awareness like others carry weapons, except yours doesn't wound, it reveals. And revelation, to the dishonest, feels like pain. They confuse healing with harm because they can't separate truth from threat. You became the storm in their nervous system. Every time your name comes up, their pulse spikes. They'll tell themselves it's hatred, but it's anticipation. They know you'll notice what they hide, and that terrifies them more than any lie they've ever told. So now they whisper, be careful around them. They'll figure you out. They don't realize you already have. The trick isn't guessing, it's listening. And you listen deeper than anyone they've met. You hear intent where others hear tone. You read patterns where others see randomness. That's not magic, that's mastery. You don't announce what you know. You let it breathe. You let it sit between you and them. until the weight of their own silence cracks open the truth. That's your elegance, patience as pressure. People underestimate how much terror hides inside a pause. You've mastered that pause. It's the invisible interrogation that leaves no fingerprints. They walk away swearing, "You must have inside information." You do. It's called attention. Attention makes you untouchable. You see micro-expressions flicker like sparks in a storm. You track contradictions the way a hunter tracks footprints. You know when an apology is rehearsed, when kindness is transactional, when affection is camouflage. That's why they can't lie easily anymore. Their own bodies betray them before their words do. You don't even need proof. Your stillness becomes evidence. And what happens when someone like you walks through a world built on pretending? The walls creak. The actors forget their lines. They try to restore the illusion, but your presence distorts it. You carry an atmosphere, a subtle hum that says, "Truth is near." That hum unsettles them more than any confrontation could. They'd rather fight than feel exposed. But you don't give them that luxury. You let them implode quietly, under the gravity of honesty. They tell others you're hard to read, yet you've been transparent all along. You're consistent, and consistency scares people who depend on masks. They can't manipulate what doesn't flinch. You stopped reacting, and now you're unpredictable. They call that coldness. It's clarity. You realized emotions are not weapons to be waved. They're instruments to be tuned. Yours play symphonies, theirs play static. When they try to gaslight you, it backfires. You don't fight the narrative. You let contradictions expose themselves. They'll rewrite history in real time, but you've memorized reality like scripture. You quote it back to them, gently, without anger. That's what shatters them, the gentleness. They expected rage, not precision. Precision cuts cleaner than fury. You've learned to wound with accuracy, not volume. You see, people crave illusion because illusion forgives them. You don't. You make them answer for every inconsistency they thought no one noticed. You're not cruel, you're corrective. But to the fragile, correction feels like cruelty. So they label you toxic, distant, over-analytical, anything to avoid admitting that you were right. You don't need them to confess. Their behavior already does. Sometimes, late at night, you can almost hear their thoughts circling you. How did they know? Who told them? What if they see through me, too? It's funny. They think insight requires information. It doesn't. It requires presence. You observe without agenda. That's why you notice everything they hide from themselves. Their words try to distract. Your awareness anchors to what's unsaid. You listen for motive, not message. And that difference rewrites every conversation you have. You've realized that honesty, when sustained long enough, becomes a form of rebellion. In a culture addicted to facades, truth is subversive. You embody that rebellion without shouting about it. Your calm is confrontation. Your clarity is chaos to the deceitful. That's why they band together to explain you away. People always unite against what they can't understand. But here's the irony. They wanted to read you first. They studied your moves, your history, your tone, thinking they'd find a formula. They didn't. You're not random. You're responsive. You mirror what's real, and that confuses those who live in performance. They can't calculate someone who acts from instinct instead of agenda. You respond to energy, not approval. You see patterns where they see coincidence. You connect cause and effect faster than they can rationalize it. And by the time they recognize the pattern, you've already moved 3 steps beyond. That's the real reason they spiral. You dismantle their timing. Manipulation relies on anticipation. You removed it. They can't predict your reactions because your reactions are tailored to truth, not manipulation. You're reactive only to reality, not illusion. That makes you immune, and immunity looks like danger to those who thrive on control. Now the rumor has evolved. It's no longer, be careful what you say around them. It's, don't even think about crossing them, because every lie that touches your orbit combusts. You don't expose people intentionally. It's just that your energy refuses to coexist with deception. Lies corrode themselves in your presence. You are the natural end of dishonesty, the inevitable audit of character. That's what they sense when you walk in, the audit beginning. You don't enjoy watching them unravel. You'd prefer peace, but peace requires honesty, and honesty terrifies the deceitful. So you stand there, calm, unreactive, while they reveal everything trying to hide it. It's almost poetic how fear makes people confess indirectly. Their nervous laughter, their over-explaining, their sudden kindness, it's all confession in disguise. You read it fluently. Sometimes you wonder if you should dim your perception, pretend not to notice, make them comfortable again. But comfort never taught you anything. Discomfort did. You know that clarity has a cost, and you've already paid it. You've lost people, illusions, whole identities that couldn't survive exposure. And yet here you are, sharper, quieter, infinitely harder to deceive. That's the trade-off, isolation in exchange for accuracy. But tell me, when was the last time you truly missed ignorance? You've tasted truth too long to crave illusion again. You'd rather walk alone in awareness than be adored in blindness. That choice, right there, is what separates you from them. They chase belonging. You chase alignment. They build walls. You build mirrors. And here's what they can't grasp. This sense you have, this instinct that makes them nervous, it's not supernatural. It's earned. Every sleepless night, every betrayal, every realization carved sensitivity into you. You've been tempered by experience until intuition became almost prophetic. That's not magic. That's memory refined into instinct. You're a scholar of patterns, fluent in motives, and they confuse fluency for foresight. So now, when something happens, you already know who's lying, who's hiding, who's planning. They call it coincidence. You call it consistency. You've simply observed enough cycles to predict repetition, and the more accurate you become, the more frightened they get. Their guilt turns your insight into superstition. They whisper that you have a gift. You don't. You have evidence. Every room you enter becomes a test of integrity. You don't announce it, but the moment you speak, truth rearranges itself. Pretenders withdraw, the honest exhale. The room recalibrates. That's the quiet authority of awareness. You don't demand respect, you evoke it. Because people sense when they're being seen clearly, and even fear bows to clarity. So keep watching, keep noticing. Let them panic under the weight of their own secrets. You don't owe them comfort, only accuracy. They'll call it cruelty until they realize it's mercy. Because truth, no matter how sharp, cleans deeper than deceit ever could. And when they ask again, trembling, how the hell did you know? You'll just tilt your head, the faintest smile forming. Not pride, not mockery, just understanding. Because the real answer isn't something they could handle. The real answer is that you were never guessing. You were remembering patterns they thought were invisible. But today, those patterns glow like veins under a black light, every secret pulsing neon in the dark. They feel it now, The audit has begun. The same way they once studied you. You're studying the entire landscape. Nothing escapes. Every flicker of hesitation, every mismatched word, every delayed reply, it all feeds your awareness. And that awareness has grown into something unmanageable for them. They can't fake friendship without sweating. They can't plot without the room itself betraying them. You've become the mirror they can't destroy. They throw denial at it. It reflects evidence. They hurl gossip. It bounces back as revelation. You've made perception their punishment. They thought they could play you, but they forgot you learned the game from watching cheaters lose. You didn't chase victory. You studied tells. And now every player exposes themselves the moment they sit at your table. You can hear guilt breathing before it speaks. You can taste envy across a handshake. It's like the world forgot how to lie properly once you started listening. They used to call you paranoid. Now they call you prophetic. They whisper it like folklore. Be careful. They see things. At first, it was mockery. Now it's fear dressed as humor. You've become myth in their private conversations, not because of what you do, but because of what you know before you do it. Their texts sound nervous. Their laughter ends too soon. They're afraid that every coincidence is another confirmation of your insight. You've turned reality into proof. You notice it, the new way they move. They pause before greeting you, scan your eyes for clues, speak in half sentences, hoping to hide intention and ambiguity. But ambiguity doesn't hide, it magnifies. You can hear intent through hesitation. Their very effort to mask the truth is what reveals it. They don't realize your intuition doesn't read words. It reads resistance. The harder they resist, the louder their energy becomes. And you stay composed. You let them project, pretend, panic. You don't interrupt the unraveling. You let it finish itself. Because paranoia needs no enemy, it creates one. You simply exist, and they supply the rest. That's what makes your presence unbearable. You don't accuse, you imply. You don't demand confession. You let discomfort perform it. Every moment around you becomes an unspoken interrogation, and they're guilty before they even open their mouths. You've seen it happen in real time, the confident ones cracking first. The louder they insist on being trustworthy, the quicker they slip. They write long messages defending integrity no one questioned. They offer details you never asked for. They volunteer information to prove innocence. But the innocent never need proof. Only the exposed do. You watch it unfold like choreography, denial, projection, deflection, collapse. Same pattern, different faces. You've turned pattern recognition into prophecy, and that terrifies them. They think you predict events, but you're just fluent in human repetition. You've cataloged betrayal like an anthropologist of deceit. The expressions change, the excuses evolve, but the pattern, oh, the pattern never lies. You've seen this movie too many times to be surprised by the plot twist. So while they panic, wondering if you can sense what they did, you simply nod internally. You already know the ending. They're spiraling now. Each conversation with you feels like walking a tightrope over exposure. Their minds replay past interactions. Did I say too much? Did they notice that look? They rewrite history, trying to locate the moment they lost control. And that's where their sanity starts slipping. You're not haunting them, their conscience is. You just provided the silence for it to echo. But here's the cruel symmetry. They wanted control. They wanted to read you. That's what started it. They analyzed your behavior, studied your tone, tried to anticipate your moves. But when you turned that same scrutiny outward, it broke them. They realized you weren't just surviving, you were decoding. Every act of manipulation became data. Every betrayal became education. You evolved faster than they could keep their lies consistent. Now they're chasing versions of you that no longer exist. It's almost beautiful, the irony. They built their confidence on your confusion. Then you removed confusion, and their confidence dissolved. They can't understand how you remain calm while their schemes burn down. They can't accept that awareness doesn't require aggression. They mistake stillness for weakness because they've never met power that doesn't need to announce itself. You're teaching them that omniscience doesn't shout, it hums. You've noticed the physical signs, too. The restless tapping, the darting eyes, the unfinished sentences. People who once towered over you now shrink mid-conversation. Their words collapse under the weight of your quiet gaze. You don't glare, you observe. Observation, when pure, feels supernatural to the dishonest. They whisper about your energy, your aura, as if understanding were sorcery. They don't realize it's just pattern meeting accountability. Sooner or later, one of them breaks rank. The guilt becomes too heavy, the anxiety too loud, and they approach you with forced calm. "Hey, can we talk?" they'll say. Of course they can. You let them speak. Watch the tremor in their jaw, the hesitation in their voice, the unnecessary explanations. They confess without confessing. Every apology wrapped in vagueness is a message. I know you know. You forgive before they finish, not out of mercy, but finality. You have nothing left to prove. Still, your presence lingers long after you leave. Conversations shift to whispers. They analyze your tone the way scientists analyze anomalies. They start suspecting each other. Who told them? Who slipped? Paranoia eats alliances. Distrust spreads faster than rumor. Suddenly everyone's watching everyone. You didn't divide them. You revealed the cracks already there. Your awareness just accelerated gravity. They call it a curse. You call it clarity. But deep down, even they sense the necessity of it. Someone has to hold the mirror. Someone has to make the performance collapse. You were chosen by experience, not by preference, to be that mirror. And mirrors don't apologize for reflection. You can feel the shift now, the moment when fear transforms into fascination. After the panic fades, curiosity remains. They start wanting to understand how you do it. They'll mimic your detachment, your precision, your unflinching eye contact. They'll fail, of course, because imitation without suffering breeds emptiness. What gives your perception weight is pain, refined into empathy. You see, empathy isn't softness, it's accuracy. You read people not to control them, but to stop being controlled by them. That difference creates power they can't replicate. You've become the quiet equation that no one can solve, but everyone studies. Some will hate you for it. Others will follow you silently, hoping proximity grants insight. But awareness isn't contagious. It's cultivated. And cultivation demands solitude. That's why you walk alone now. Not because you're superior, but because crowds blur signals. You crave precision, not popularity. The world interprets your calm as arrogance because they don't know what peace looks like without ignorance. But you know better. Peace is pattern recognized, consequence accepted, truth endured. And truth once endured becomes serenity. You wear that serenity like armor, and it unsettles those still addicted to chaos. They try to provoke emotion from you, anything to prove you're still reachable by confusion. But you've outgrown reaction. You operate from comprehension now, and comprehension is silence with purpose. And that's what drives them over the edge. Your silence with purpose. Because they can't manipulate what doesn't respond. They throw words like hooks, waiting for reaction, waiting for proof that their illusion still works on you. But you've learned not to bleed on bait. You let their noise echo in the empty space between who they are and who they pretend to be. The distance widens, and so does their fear. They realize control only works on the willing, and you're done volunteering. That's the moment they start to lose composure. They'll call you unreadable, unpredictable, even dangerous. But those words are really just synonyms for uncontrolled. You've broken every script they relied on. You don't give them predictable outrage, predictable forgiveness, predictable collapse. You give them nothing they can weaponize. You stay still, and stillness is their nightmare. Because stillness is where reflection begins, and reflection is where guilt becomes unbearable. Now every glance you give feels like a searchlight, every pause an autopsy. They start seeing judgment where there's only observation, condemnation where there's only comprehension. You didn't change, you just stopped cushioning their lies. And in a world addicted to comfort, honesty feels like violence. That's why they keep asking, how the hell did you know? It's not a question, it's an admission. What they're really saying is, how did you see the parts of me I hide from myself? They'll never understand that you see through them because you've seen through yourself first. You've faced your own shadows long enough to recognize theirs. You've traced every flaw, every denial, every desperate justification until your own soul became transparent. Self-awareness is the price of psychic vision. You paid it, and now you walk among the blind with sight that terrifies them. That's why people flinch when you speak truth softly. It sounds like prophecy to them. They think you're pulling information from thin air, but you're just reading the room. Truth leaves residue, and you've trained your senses to smell it. The dishonest don't understand that. They think exposure happens in explosions. They don't realize it begins in whispers. You whisper clarity, and suddenly their whole structure collapses. They start connecting dots you never pointed to. Their paranoia becomes self-directed. They accuse each other, delete messages, reframe stories, even rewrite memories to escape the invisible scrutiny they feel when your name is mentioned. You've become a legend without trying, the kind whispered through clenched teeth. Don't mess with them. They know things. They think you enjoy the fear. You don't. You simply accept that understanding always comes dressed as threat to those who benefit from confusion, and confusion is dying fast around you. You can feel the shift, a strange quiet spreading across your interactions. They talk less, reveal less, because everything they hide echoes louder in silence. It's the paradox of guilt. The more they suppress, the more transparent they become. You don't need confession, you just need proximity. Truth bends toward you like metal to magnet. But the more you see, the lonelier it gets. Because once you start perceiving motives beneath words, innocence becomes rare. Every smile carries context. Every promise hides compromise. You stop expecting purity from people, not out of bitterness but recognition. Awareness is a lonely currency. It buys freedom, but costs belonging. And yet you wouldn't trade it. You've outgrown comfort built on deceit. You've learned that being misunderstood is cheaper than being manipulated. So you keep moving differently now. You navigate spaces like a ghost of discernment. You no longer react to chaos. You document it. You observe people revealing themselves in real time, and you almost feel compassion. Almost. Because even though you understand their fear, you can't shield them from consequence. That's the hardest part of seeing clearly, watching people destroy themselves with patterns they refuse to acknowledge. You could warn them, but wisdom has taught you. Interference robs growth. Let collapse teach what comfort never could. You stand at the edge of every conversation like a truth detector disguised as a person. And while they stammer through alibis, you stay silent, watching the play unfold. You know which act they're in. You've seen it before. You could recite their lines by heart. But you stay quiet because sometimes the best exposure is time. Lies age faster than honesty. Give them a little time, and they'll confess through exhaustion. You can already see it happening. The same people who once questioned your instincts now double-check their own memories when you speak. You've made them doubt themselves, not through manipulation, but through accuracy. You've made them realize their version of events doesn't align with reality, and nothing destabilizes a manipulator faster than inconsistency meeting evidence. Their faces reveal it before their words do. That fleeting look of defeat, that tiny exhale of acceptance. They know you're right. They just can't say it out loud. That's where your power lives, in unspoken validation. You don't need applause. You don't even need acknowledgement. The truth stands whether they admit it or not, and the weight of that truth will keep pressing until denial collapses under its own gravity. You simply stand nearby, patient, watchful, inevitable. Awareness doesn't chase. It attracts confessions naturally. Sometimes they'll even try to recruit you, to use your insight for their own games. Tell me what you think about this person, they'll say, pretending it's curiosity when it's really strategy. You'll smile because you already know their angle. They want your perception without paying your price. But awareness shared with the unready becomes ammunition. So you give them half-truths wrapped in riddles. Let them misinterpret wisdom as mystery. That way, the truth stays protected. You've learned discretion the hard way. Not everything seen deserves expression. Some truths are meant to be kept until time matures them. You carry them quietly, not out of fear, but responsibility. The power to perceive comes with the duty to discern when to speak. You speak less now, but every word you release lands like a verdict. And that's what unsettles them the most, your precision. You don't talk much, but when you do, it rearranges people. The aftermath is almost predictable. Isolation followed by imitation. They distance themselves first, claiming you're too intense. Then they return, mimicking your awareness, quoting your phrases, adopting your calm. But it never fits, because they want the authority of perception without the accountability of pain. You can't copy what was earned through suffering. They'll keep trying, though, and every failed attempt will remind them how far behind they are. And that's the cycle repeating again, the watchers becoming the watched. They began by studying you. Now they study themselves through your lens. You've inverted the hierarchy without force, without revenge, just through presence. That's what real power looks like. Not dominance, but influence. You altered their psychology without touching them. You made awareness contagious, to the point that they can't return to ignorance without feeling sick. Now the sickness spreads. Every room you once entered in silence echoes with imitation. They adjust their tone, their phrasing, their posture. Each gesture borrowed from the one who once unsettled them. They call it intuition training. But but it's really desperation to keep up. You're living rent-free in their instincts now. They hear your questions in their heads before they speak. They second-guess every thought. They check their motives twice before moving. That's not coincidence, that's the afterimage of truth burning in their retinas. You've become the voice in their conscience they can't mute. Every lie rehearsed sounds brittle. Every secret feels radioactive. They try to convince themselves you're ordinary, but ordinary doesn't leave fingerprints on perception. They feel your presence like static before a storm. Not loud, just unavoidable. Their paranoia is no longer about you. It's about what you've awakened in them. Because once someone sees through illusion, everyone else starts questioning reality. You didn't just expose people, you exposed patterns. And now, they're unraveling beautifully. The masks are slipping faster than they can replace them. What began as suspicion has turned into collective confession. They're realizing that maybe the problem was never your insight. It was their dishonesty. You gave them no choice but to see themselves, and self-awareness hurts worse than exposure. Still, somewhere beneath the panic, gratitude grows. They're learning that discomfort is the first step toward integrity. They're learning that fear of being seen is proof they were hiding too long. You stand apart, watching the metamorphosis you triggered. No celebration, no vengeance, just quiet acknowledgement. This is what happens when perception becomes prophecy. People either evolve or implode, and you walk through both outcomes untouched. You don't need to defend what's already undeniable. They'll talk, they'll speculate, they'll build stories to explain your accuracy, but deep down they know. Your sixth sense isn't magic, it's mastery. It's the discipline of noticing what they avoid. So let them whisper, let them go insane connecting dots you never drew. The more they question you, the closer they get to understanding themselves. That's the final trick. You were never here to expose them. You were here to awaken them. And now, every time they ask again, trembling, "How the hell did you know?" You'll give the same answer without words. Just that quiet look, the one that says, "I didn't know. I remembered." Because that's what vision really is, memory sharpened into foresight. And you, my friend, are the reminder the world can't unsee. Look at you, standing there with that beautiful kind of damage in your chest, that dangerous kind of silence in your mouth, that pressure in your head that made everybody whisper your name like you were some kind of cautionary tale. They looked at you and decided the story was over. They saw the exhaustion in your eyes, the distance in your stare, the way you stopped explaining yourself, and they came to the most deliciously stupid conclusion they could possibly make. They thought you lost your mind, and that was perfect, because while they were busy diagnosing your collapse, you were studying their patterns. While they were gossiping about how far you'd fallen, you were memorizing every fake smile, every slick little betrayal, every moment they switched up on you the second you stopped being useful. They thought you were unraveling. You were observing. They thought you were cracking under pressure. You were becoming pressure. They thought you were too broken to think straight, too overwhelmed to move smart, too wounded to ever be dangerous again. That's the thing about people. They only respect pain they can understand. The moment your pain gets quiet, strategic, unreadable, they panic, because chaos they can laugh at. but silence. Silence makes people nervous. Silence means something is loading. Silence means you're not reacting anymore. Silence means the version of you they used to manipulate has started dying off, and now they're stuck in a room with someone they no longer know how to read. And you know what really shook them? It wasn't the sadness. It wasn't the anger. It wasn't even the breakdown. It was the fact that you came back colder, sharper, cleaner, less available, less emotional with the wrong people, less eager to prove your heart to those who treated it like a toy. They expected tears. They expected begging. They expected desperate paragraphs, emotional reactions, public meltdowns, messy explanations, one more chance speeches, one more conversation, one more attempt to make people understand what they did to you. But instead you disappeared into yourself. That's when the fear started. Because when somebody hurts you and you still keep chasing them, they feel powerful. But when somebody hurts you and you become disciplined, they start replaying everything they did. They start wondering what you know. They start wondering what you're planning. They start wondering why your energy changed, why your eyes changed, why your presence doesn't feel wounded anymore, why you stopped reaching, why you stopped arguing, why you stopped trying to rescue people from the consequences of how they treated you. See, they thought revenge was going to look loud, explosive, emotional, obvious. They thought revenge would be some dramatic crash out they could point at and use against you. They wanted you reckless. They wanted you unstable. They wanted you so consumed by pain that you'd destroy yourself before you ever became a threat to them. But you did something far more terrifying. You got patient. You let the pain sit in your bones long enough to teach you. You let the betrayal burn long enough to wake something ancient up inside you. You let the humiliation season you. You let the disrespect sober you up. You stopped asking, why did they do me like that? And started asking the only question that actually changes lives. What did this reveal? Oh, and what it revealed was ugly. It revealed who only loved the version of you that had no boundaries. It revealed who needed you exhausted so they could stay comfortable. It revealed who smiled in your face and quietly prayed for your downfall because your light made them feel small. It revealed who enjoyed your confusion because clarity would mean they couldn't control you anymore. It revealed who was never misunderstanding you. They understood you perfectly. They just benefited from pretending they didn't. That realization changes a person. Because once you understand that some people didn't accidentally hurt you, they strategically used you, a switch flips. You stop romanticizing loyalty. You stop confusing history with trust. You stop calling bare minimum behavior love. You stop handing your softness to people who weaponize vulnerability and then act shocked when you become harder to reach. And the wild part, they still thought your distance was weakness. They thought you went quiet because you had nothing left. They thought your withdrawal meant defeat. They thought your numbness meant surrender. They didn't know you were in the lab, building, rewiring, detaching, turning every memory into data, every insult into fuel, every lie into clarity, every sleepless night into vision. That's the revenge they never see coming. Not chaos, not noise, not destruction, transformation. The kind that ruins every old access point people had to you. The kind that makes their old tricks stop working. The kind that turns their confidence into confusion. The kind that forces them to watch you become someone their manipulation can no longer reach. Because let's be honest, The deepest revenge was never about screaming the loudest. It was never about posting cryptic shots. It was never about proving how hurt you were. It was about becoming so solid, so self-respecting, so mentally dangerous that the very people who played with your name start choking on the realization that they created the one version of you they can never control again. You didn't lose your mind. You lost your tolerance. You lost your willingness to keep giving people the benefit of the doubt when they kept handing you evidence. You lost your addiction to over-explaining. You lost your need to be seen as nice by people committed to treating you dirty. You lost your old habit of shrinking to keep the peace. You lost your fear of outgrowing people who felt entitled to your old softness. And when that old version of you died, everybody who benefited from it called you crazy. Of course they did. People always call it madness when they no longer have access. They call it pride when you finally have standards. They call it cold when you stop bleeding for free. They call it revenge when you simply stop volunteering for your own disrespect. That's why your silence bothered them more than your pain ever did. Because your silence had structure, it had intention, it had teeth. It said, "I finally see you." And there is nothing more uncomfortable for a manipulator than being fully seen by the person they underestimated. You started moving different. Your circle got smaller. Your words got fewer. Your instincts got louder. You stopped telling everybody your plans because you finally understood something most people learn way too late. Not everybody clapping for you wants you to win. Some people ask what you're doing just to measure how to stay ahead of you. Some people comfort you only to collect information. Some people lean in close not because they care, but because they want a front row seat to your weakness. So you learned to keep things sacred. You learned to let people hear about your growth after it's already happened. You learned that mystery is protection. You learned that privacy is power. You learned that when your life is under construction, not everybody deserves the blueprint. And that changed the game. Because now, while they're busy performing, you're positioning. While they're posting, you're preparing. While they're talking, you're mastering. While they're assuming you're still drowning in the same pain they left you in, you're building a mind so disciplined it scares even you sometimes. That version of you, dangerous, not because it wants to destroy, but because it no longer fears losing what was never loyal to begin with. That's freedom. That's when your whole posture changes. You stop negotiating with disrespect. You stop explaining your value to people committed to misunderstanding it. You stop auditioning for spaces that only tolerated you when you were convenient. You stop watering dead things and calling yourself patient. You stop trying to heal in the same rooms that taught you to doubt your worth. And then something delicious happens. The people who thought you were done start hearing about you. Not from you. Never from you. From the results. From the shift. From the energy. From the fact that you don't look broken anymore. You look focused. You don't sound bitter anymore. You sound certain. You don't feel desperate anymore. You feel unavailable. And now the same people who were so sure you'd never recover are forced to sit with a brutal truth. Your breakdown didn't bury you. It introduced you to yourself. That's why you can't regret what broke you. I know that sounds insane when you remember the nights you almost came apart. The overthinking, the chest pain, the rage, the numbness, the way your own reflection felt unfamiliar. The way disappointment piled so high, you started questioning whether being good even mattered anymore. I know. But listen carefully. That pain stripped the fantasy out of your life. It showed you who was real when there was nothing flashy left to gain from you. It exposed who only loved your light but had no interest in your healing. It taught you that some people prefer the bleeding version of you because a healed version might finally leave. It forced you to develop discernment, and discernment is a gift wrapped in heartbreak. Now you notice things faster. You notice the energy shift before the betrayal arrives. You notice the envy hiding inside fake support. You notice the passive disrespect disguised as jokes. You notice the way some people only reach out when they need your softness, your ideas, your labor, your loyalty, your emotional availability. You notice. And because you notice, you no longer get caught the same way. That right there is revenge. Not revenge that destroys your soul. Revenge that upgrades it. Revenge that says, you don't get to use me as a lesson while I stay the same. Revenge that turns pain into standards. Revenge that turns betrayal into instinct. Revenge that turns humiliation into hunger. Revenge that turns abandonment into independence so deep that nobody can ever threaten you with their absence again. You know how powerful that is? To become someone who no longer begs for what should have been given with love. To become someone who doesn't panic when people leave because you finally understand that some exits are divine. To become someone who can sit alone without feeling worthless. That's not a small thing. That's a revolution inside the mind. And revolutions are messy. That's why from the outside, it looked like you were losing it. You were sleeping weird, thinking too much, pulling away, questioning everything. Some days you were fired up. Some days you were empty. Some days you wanted to fight. Some days you wanted to vanish. Some days you hated what they did to you. Some days you hated that you let it happen. Some days you missed people you had no business missing. Some days you wanted one apology, one truth, one moment of honesty. But healing doesn't always look elegant. Sometimes it looks like confusion before clarity. Sometimes it looks like isolation before wisdom. Sometimes it looks like emotional demolition before identity. People who have never rebuilt themselves will always mistake reconstruction for madness. Let them. Because while they're laughing at the mess, they don't realize you're pouring concrete. And when the foundation finishes setting, good luck moving you. That's the part nobody warns people about. Once a person gets tired enough, hurt enough, disrespected enough, embarrassed enough, something in them becomes unshakable. Not because life gets easier, but because illusions stop working. You stop flinching at the truth. You stop decorating pain with pretty excuses. You stop explaining red flags away. You stop betraying your own intuition just to maintain access to people who never deserved it. You become harder to fool, harder to tempt, harder to break. And people feel that. They feel it in the way you enter a room now. They feel it in the way you don't rush to fill silence. They feel it in the way your kindness now comes with standards. They feel it in the way you can love deeply without abandoning yourself. That's what scares them, not your anger, your control. Because anger is easy to provoke, control is untouchable. Now when someone tries the same old game, they don't get the same old version of you. They get boundaries, they get distance, they get calm. They get that terrifying little pause where you look at them and they realize you're measuring the situation, not emotionally drowning in it. They get consequences, not speeches. That's a different creature entirely. And let's talk about the real trap you built, because this is where it gets beautiful. The trap was never for them. Not really. The trap was for the version of you that kept settling. You trapped your own self-sabotage. You trapped your people-pleasing. You trapped your fear of rejection. You trapped your craving to be understood by those committed to twisting your words. You trapped that old reflex that wanted to chase closure from people who enjoy withholding it. You trapped your own weakness, stared it in the face and said, "You don't run this anymore." That's why your energy feels different now, because you're no longer split in half. One part of you wanting peace, another part of you addicted to familiar pain, one part of you knowing better, another part of you still reaching back, one part of you craving respect, another part of you tolerating crumbs. No. Now there's alignment, and alignment is lethal, because once your mind, your standards, your instincts, and your discipline start moving together, your whole life begins to shift. You stop leaking energy into the wrong battles. You stop wasting your best years trying to explain yourself to emotionally dishonest people. You stop confusing chaos with passion. You stop calling survival love. You stop calling anxiety chemistry. You stop calling being tolerated acceptance. And the rewards start showing up quietly at first. Peace, better decisions, clearer instincts, stronger focus, a deeper voice in your own head, a new relationship with solitude, a sharper eye for who deserves access. You begin attracting differently because you are finally seeing differently. And then the threat changes sides. It's not them threatening your peace anymore. It's your growth threatening every dynamic built on your smallness. That's why some people get weird when you heal. Your healing exposes the role they played in your suffering. Your discipline exposes their laziness. Your self-respect exposes their games. Your boundaries expose their entitlement. Your glow-up, mental, emotional, spiritual, makes their old treatment of you look even uglier in hindsight. Good. Let it. Let them sit with that discomfort. Let them wonder when exactly you stopped being the person they could mishandle. Let them feel the distance. Let them realize too late that access to you was a privilege, not a guarantee. Because too many people only understand your value when your energy is no longer available on demand. And no, you don't need to announce anything. That's the beauty of it. Real power doesn't scream. Real power rearranges. It moves furniture in the soul. It changes appetite. It changes standards. It changes what you laugh at, what you tolerate, what you answer, what you chase, what you walk away from. That's what you built in the dark while they thought you were losing your mind. A new nervous system, a new standard, a new code, a new identity, one that doesn't need applause, one that doesn't need permission, one that doesn't need revenge in the childish sense, because your existence, your discipline, your refusal to break the same way twice, is already the kind of revenge most people can't survive watching. So when they look at you now and try to figure out what happened, let them wonder. Let them replay your old silence and realize it wasn't emptiness. It was calculation. Let them remember the days they mocked your pain and realize they were witnessing the birth of someone they would never be able to manipulate again. Let them choke on the fact that the very pressure they applied to crush you ended up forging you into someone far more precise, far more disciplined, far more dangerous than the version they underestimated. And you keep going. You keep building. You keep becoming. You keep letting your standards get so high that disrespect can't breathe near you. You keep protecting your focus like it's sacred. You keep making your inner world so strong that no external betrayal can send you back to being easy to play with. You keep moving like somebody who has seen the truth and cannot be seduced by illusions anymore. Because the old you wanted closure. The new you wants control. The old you wanted fairness. The new you wants clarity. The old you wanted people to feel sorry. The new you wants results. And results are ruthless. Results don't care who doubted you. Results don't argue. Results don't explain. Results just arrive, stand there cold and undeniable, and force everybody to confront what they got wrong about you. So let them keep their little story about how you cracked. Let them keep telling themselves you were unstable, emotional, dramatic, done. Meanwhile, you become the kind of person who can walk through betrayal without becoming cheap. Walk through humiliation without losing dignity. Walk through loneliness without running back to poison. Walk through doubt without abandoning the mission. That's not insanity. That's evolution with scars on it. That's wisdom built in places no one clapped for. That's self-respect pulled from the wreckage. That's what happens when pain stops being a prison and starts becoming a weapon in the right hands. And now the room feels different when you enter, doesn't it? Now your silence speaks before you do. Now your standards arrive before your smile does. Now your absence teaches lessons your presence never could. Now the people who once played with your heart have to face the one outcome they never planned for. You didn't stay broken. You got smarter. You got colder where it mattered. You got cleaner in your thinking. You got ruthless about peace. You got serious about protecting your mind. You got addicted to becoming someone your past would not even recognize. So no, they were wrong. You didn't lose your mind. You lost your fear. You lost your need to be loved by those who only valued your weakness. You lost your appetite for self-betrayal. You lost your attachment to old versions of yourself that kept saying yes when your soul was screaming no. And in that loss, something magnificent was born, something strategic, something disciplined, something beautifully unforgiving toward anything that threatens your future. So keep that look in your eyes, that unreadable look, that look that says the storm already happened, and you survived it, studied it, learned its language, and now carry weather inside your chest. Keep that energy where they can feel it, but never fully understand it. Keep becoming the proof that pain can sharpen instead of shatter. Keep becoming the consequence of everybody who mistook your heart for weakness. Keep becoming the kind of person who no longer needs revenge handed to them by fate. Because every disciplined step, every boundary, every silent level up, every refusal to go back, every moment you choose your future over your old wounds, every day you deny broken people access to the healed version of you, every time you turn pain into power instead of performance, every single time you rise without warning and move without explanation, the trap closes a little tighter. The truth gets a little louder, and the world starts realizing what they should have known from the start. The most dangerous person in the room is never the one making noise. It's the one who went quiet, got focused, and came back impossible to play with.